Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that, how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? Are there various versions of the Bible? And how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edubuating, and then Kafui Tay. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya.
Good day, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode on the Voice of Reformation. We continue our discussion on the resurrection of the Christ. The last time we looked at evidence that points to the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Today we are going to focus our discussion on certain objections that people who doubt the resurrection have raised, or let me say skeptics have raised regarding the resurrection of Jesus Christ. There has been many theories that has been postulated against the resurrection, and in today's discussion we are going to delve into those theories and find out the truth or otherwise the basis on which these theories are founded. And I am Richard Donfe, your sitting host again, and with me this evening is my brother Kafui. So Kafui, good evening.
Good evening.
All right. I think we had a very exciting session last time where we talked about the evidence that points to the resurrection. Mm-hmm. So if you don't mind, can you just sum it all up for us? Just a brief summary on all the evidence that points to the resurrection of Christ.
Okay. So in terms of evidence, there are a lot. Last week we tried to use what we call the minimal facts approach, which is originally postulated by a well-known apologist called Gary Habermas. So essentially, we're trying to limit ourselves to facts that are widely accepted by the vast majority of scholars. So we considered those 4 + 1 facts. So we spoke about the fact that Jesus was actually crucified and he died. So we spoke about some of the secular writings by historians like Tacitus and Josephus. which all spoke to the fact that Jesus was actually crucified and indeed he died. Then we also spoke about the fact that the disciples sincerely believed that they had seen the risen Christ. And that we also went into details that not only did they just believe, but they actually went on even to die and suffer for what they actually believed they had seen, which we believe is the resurrection. Then we spoke about the conversion of Paul, the skeptic. We also spoke about the conversion of James, the skeptic. And then the last one we spoke about was the empty tomb. And so basically this is what we looked at in a nutshell. There are several other ways of presenting the evidence. You have the traditional theological way that we do it, but we just limited ourselves to the facts that are accepted by everyone. We said that considering all of these facts, the only thing that is able to explain all of these things is the resurrection of Jesus. And I believe that in today's discussions, this is one theory that we have propounded, that for all of these things, these facts are things that happened. So what is it that made these disciples believe that the Jesus Christ who had died, which is the first fact that we spoke about, what is it that made them believe that he had actually resurrected? We spoke about the fact that he appeared to them and they saw him. And based on this, they were willing to even die for what they had seen. The fact that Paul, who was a skeptic, converted, what is it that made him convert? We point back to the resurrection. So if indeed the resurrection had not happened, Paul wouldn't have seen the risen Christ and wouldn't have converted. Likewise, James, the brother of Jesus, if he had not seen Jesus resurrected, he wouldn't have also converted and become it. And in fact, he was able to lay down his life. His head was actually cut off for what he believed he had seen. Then we spoke about the empty tomb. It's only the resurrection that's able to prove the empty tomb. If you have the body, just present the body, and I think that Christianity will be off.
Okay, well said. So you have spoken about certain evidence that points to the resurrection of Christ. But then again, like I said in my introduction, there are other theories that has been postulated by some skeptics, which appear to be quite reasonable, that explains away or runs down the evidence of the resurrection. One of such theories is what we call the swoon theory. So it is believed that due to the excruciating pain that Jesus Christ was subjected to, he fainted, got revived when he was put in the tomb. I mean, wiggled his way out of the linen that had been used to wrap him, and then he came back to life. So he really didn't die, but then fainted and got resuscitated and then came back. And the disciples were all excited, thinking that he has actually been resurrected. So what is your response to this theory?
Yeah, it's very interesting. The swoon theory, it's an interesting idea. Unfortunately, it's something that is no longer being discussed in by scholars, because it fails to explain certain things. So first of all, it's been established by medical professionals, in fact, and published in journals, that and proving beyond doubt that Jesus actually died on the cross. In that, if you look at, so usually it's true that sometimes when people are crucified, it takes a while before they die, because mostly they die as a result of asphyxiation. Their inability to breathe is what really causes them to die. But in the case, and that is a painful, slow death. In the case of Jesus, before he was crucified, he had gone through severe whipping, a kind of whipping that is able to tear the body. And he may have even lost blood before getting onto the cross. So that's something that we have to first of all establish, that it's highly impossible that after all the pain, after all the trauma that he went through, and then being laid on the cross, he would have the strength to endure that kind of pain. Because the way crucifixion is done, you are nailed onto the wood or the cross, and what happens is that they have to sort of push their body up, because you'll be in a state where your muscles are really in a state of relaxation, and so you're only able to inhale and not able to exhale. So in order to exhale, you have to push your body up, and consistently, looking at what he had gone through, he couldn't have sustained that for a long time. Secondly, the fact that he was pierced with the spear, and then he was able to, from medical science, considering what happened in the account, it meant that the Bible says that we saw water and we saw blood, that really it got to his heart, into the pericardium. That's how you see the fluid coming out, what they are calling as water, or describing as water. And then the blood that also came out, to really prove that he was dead. And these Roman soldiers were experts at crucifixion. They could not have faked the death of Christ. Then, so in terms of establishing the fact that he really died, it's a fact. But the other thing that we have to look at again is the fact that how does this explain the conversion of Paul, and how does this explain the conversion of James? Again, if Jesus had not actually died, put in the tomb, with all that you are saying, somebody who had fainted from all the beatings and everything that he had gone through, how was he able to push that heavy stone that was placed there? And then the last thing I would say is that what the disciples describe as convincing to them is that they saw a glorious Jesus.
A glorified body.
Exactly. So if really it's just an issue of a revival and he actually didn't die, then the state in which he would have come out wouldn't be one that would be able to convince anybody. And I'm sure even by the time the disciples were touching him, you should be complaining that you can feel the pain, because it's just 3 days. Without receiving any medical care, without receiving anything, he comes out very revived, walking through walls and all of that. That is not, it doesn't make sense. So the swoon theory, in fact, is something that nobody is really giving any credence to for some time now. It's something that has been dealt with, and I think that there's a lot of data to support the fact that he actually died on the cross.
Okay, so that leads me to another theory. So there is also a group of skeptics who believe that, of course, they accept that the story is legendary, but then they also think that it is so embellished, it is so exaggerated, that there are certain false aspects to the whole story of the resurrection that we are going about telling other people. And they are saying that a lot of ingredients have been introduced into the whole resurrection theory, and then certain aspects, he actually died, and we have exaggerated the story of his death and added a resurrection just to make him appear like something out of the normal. So that is what another sect of people believe. They agree he died, but then they think that we have just embellished and exaggerated the whole story about his resurrection. What is your response to that as well?
Yeah, so there are some people, like you rightly said, who think that it was a legend that developed, which means that so people started telling the stories, and then with time, so initially they are trying to say that initially it wasn't claimed that Jesus had resurrected, but with time, people kept on sharing the story,
it got embellished.
Exactly, and suddenly became the resurrection. And that doesn't speak to the facts as well. In that, like I said, there was a creed which Paul quotes in 1 Corinthians 15. And that creed dates back to within a year when Jesus died and resurrected. What it means is that, legends don't develop over a short period. Legends develop over a very long time, because there will be people or witnesses around who could actually correct it. Do you understand? And so within that 1 year that we developed the creed, where they were reciting and saying that and believed that Jesus had died and he had risen from the dead, within that short period, it's not possible for a legend to develop, because you have the eyewitnesses, the original claimants of that truth around to make that correction as it is. So if it had happened over, let's say, 100 years, then we are getting people to now talk about it. We could, but there are earlier sources that speak to the fact that this was something that really happened. So apart from that, the point we are making is that the disciples actually believed that they had seen the risen Christ. So it's not an issue of somebody came to tell them. The disciples who had seen the man raised from the dead believed so strongly what they had seen and were willing to die for it. A legend cannot explain that. I mean, it's not possible. Are you also saying that Paul, who was a skeptic, believed in the legend? Paul's, conversion is not as a result of somebody telling him that Jesus had risen from the dead, but based on a personal experience where he himself saw the risen Christ. James the skeptic saw the risen Christ. So if it's a legend, how do you explain the empty tomb? Because if it is a legend, then there shouldn't be an empty tomb. It's very simple to just resolve this issue. All you have to do is to produce the body. Once you produce the body, any lies being, speculated would be resolved. But I think beyond everything, the fact that Paul the skeptic was converted based on an experience of seeing that risen Christ tells you that indeed it happened, and it's not as a result of a legend. Because if it is a legend, then it means that Paul may have heard the legend. But in the experience of Paul, it's not about the legend. He's not talking about hearing stories of a risen Christ. He's talking about the fact that he himself on the road to, because this is somebody, a pious Jew who was bent on destroying the Christians. If he had not encountered the man Jesus, the risen Christ, he wouldn't have just believed, because initially he was also thinking, oh, these people are saying they are just spewing lies. But based on his experience, he was able to. So the fact is that all the 4 facts that we spoke about, this legend theory is not able to explain away these things. So that would be my response to that.
Then again, other people also think that there is some fraudulence somewhere. So they think, there's a school of thought that thinks that during that period, for criminals who were crucified on the cross, nobody even gave them the respect of burying them in a tomb. They were all thrown into a pit, and sometimes people never cared where the body went to. Nobody was even interested in knowing where these bodies were dumped, because they were criminals. So it is believed that some people think that the body of Christ was treated in such a way, and then fraudulent stories began circulating around that he had resurrected when people couldn't find his body. And still supporting the fraudulent theory is people who think that the body of Christ was actually stolen from the tomb by his disciples, and therefore we cannot find the body, and we are saying that he has resurrected. So either the body was not found in the first place, or the body was actually buried in the tomb like the Bible says, but then the disciples stole it. In both of these stories, there's iota of, or there is some evidence of fraud according to those who drive these theories. What is your response to that?
Okay, so this is also another very interesting. I think I will tackle it from the last point that you made. So indeed, the fraud theory really suggests 2 things, possible ways. either the body was stolen by the disciples, or the body, as you rightly said, was not even found in the tomb. Perhaps another group of people stole the body. The contention is not so much about whether he was buried in the tomb or not, because in this instance, somebody is named. So they didn't say he was buried in a tomb. They named whose tomb it was that he was buried in. And this person we are talking about was part of the Sanhedrin. So Joseph of Arimathea was part of the Sanhedrin. And so it's not possible that they would just have told a lie about, naming Joseph, and Joseph would have just kept quiet. So that issue about, there's clear evidence that, first of all, we named the exact location and the exact place where he was buried, the tomb. And so it's something that is verifiable, that you can go and check. Then on the issue of the stolen body, that's even more interesting. You are saying that the disciples of Jesus, and that is the first objection that even the Jews raised when the soldiers reported. They told them that they want to bribe them to tell that story that the body had been stolen by the disciples. So first of all, that the soldiers were asleep. So the soldiers were asleep, but they were able to see that it was the disciples who came to steal the body. But they were not able to stop them from, stealing the body. At least rolling the stone away and all of that. And this is a heavy stone. And these weak disciples were able to pull it away. The soldiers couldn't see it. They were asleep, yet they were able to see that they came to steal the body. It doesn't make sense. Number two, it doesn't also explain the fact that the disciples sincerely believed that they had seen the resurrected Christ and were willing to die for it. So you are saying that the disciples went to intentionally steal the body and then believed that lie and then were willing to die for it. Have you heard of the Watergate scandal before?
Tell me about it.
So the Watergate scandal was, what really brought, let me say, the downfall of President Nixon. One of the guys said something after the trial. He said that it was a cover-up. They were supposed to, lie. All the people, these were established politicians. At a point when they got to see that the consequences of, trying to do the cover-up was going to cost them a lot, you know what happened? Not even a single one of them. They initially telling lies, but at a point, they all began to speak the truth. When they were threatened with imprisonment, and they had seen that it wasn't going well for them. So it's something that we have to understand, that if I intentionally know of something, that this is a lie. For all of these people, 500 people that saw Jesus appear, if they knew this was a lie, definitely one or two people would have thrown in the towel and spoken the truth at a point. But not even a single one of them. All the 12 disciples, not even a single one of them, they were all ready to die for what they had seen. And so clearly, the issue of the stolen body also doesn't explain the facts as I have already, discussed. Then again, talking about the fact that the disciples had stolen the body and were willing to die for it. How does that again explain the conversion of Paul? How does that again explain the conversion of James, who claimed they had seen the risen Christ? This conversion of Paul and conversion of James is very important, because we are talking about Paul, who was persecuting the Christians. You could just imagine, this is Paul, who is very zealous about the Jewish, traditions, a typical Jew. And he saw these people as people who were accursed because they were blaspheming against God. For him to now turn around and be willing to suffer for that same thing, and you tell me that the disciples had stolen the body, and so Paul did what? So it means that initially Paul was part of the people who believed that the disciples had stolen the body, until he encountered the risen Christ. And so the stolen body again is not also sufficient to explain all these four facts that we are speaking about.
So dwelling on Paul seeing the risen Christ. So the spirits, or let me put it this way, Paul didn't see Christ immediately he was resurrected like the other disciples did. It took time and it took some spiritual revelation for Paul to see Christ. So there are others who are also saying that in fact Christ resurrected, but to them it was only a spiritual resurrection. So the disciples were seeing a spirit and not really the body with which Christ died. And that is how come he could appear anywhere he wanted, he could go through walls, and he could do all those supernatural things. So it was just a spiritual representation of Christ they were seeing and not the resurrected body. So the body remained dead, mortalized, but then it was just a spirit. So they think it is just a mere spiritual resurrection. So what is your objection to
So if it's a spiritual resurrection, then let's just produce the body. What do you think? Yes. If it's a spiritual, and you're like you're saying, the body was still dead, and we know where the body was buried. And the disciples are claiming boldly, confidently, within a short while, that this man Jesus had risen. What do they have to do? Just go and produce the body, and let us see the body. That this is the body. But that's one side of it. That's why the experience of Thomas and the likes is very important. Thomas was a skeptic as well. He didn't believe. When the disciples were telling him, we had seen Jesus, he appeared to us. He didn't believe it. But he had the opportunity to touch him. Jesus actually asked him to come and feel it, because a spirit does not have flesh, a spirit does not have bones. And so he was able to feel it. For the skeptic Thomas now to believe it, because it's clear, if, maybe he would also assume that this is a spirit, but he actually felt it, felt the bones, felt the scars. Number two, Jesus ate with the disciples. I don't know if you know any ghost that has ever had any meals with people. And he appeared to several people. In the stories of ghosts, I don't know whether you've ever seen anywhere or heard anywhere that a ghost appeared to 500 people at a time for them to, see that ghost. We hardly hear some of these, stories. So the fact of, Jesus being raised spiritually is neither here nor there, in that they could see a resurrected Christ. What really even speaks to that is the fact that the tomb was empty. So if it was a spiritual resurrection, the tomb shouldn't be empty. We should be able to still see the body. By now they would have enshrined the tomb and people would go there and go and worship. But that's not the case, because he is not there.
So if it was really his body, what explains him appearing and disappearing and appearing in different places within a very short time and all that, if it was really the body of Christ that he resurrected? Because we know human bodies don't have that supernatural prowess. So if it wasn't a spirit, what then explains how he was just appearing and disappearing?
So the assumption is that just because he's appearing and disappearing, it is a spirit.
Yes.
No, that's not. Do you know that in our world today, if with all the technology that we are seeing now, somebody can also say that, oh, the fact that you're able to, call somebody and see the person on the phone, that person is a spirit. If we take that back into those ages, the point I'm making is that when it comes to spiritual experiences, you can't touch, you can't feel. I don't want to go into the theological explanations, but I think you are pushing me there, so I just have to speak to. We are talking about a glorified body.
Okay.
The glorified body that we Christians believe that's how we are going to be like. In fact, the teachings about the resurrection, right from the Old Testament through to the New Testament, speak of a new body that will be given to us. And Jesus exemplified that, or showed that to us. And so he had a glorified body. That is not a spirit. For the fact that he could eat, for the fact that he could sit with them and stay with people for 40 days, that is not a spirit. And they were seeing him, and they were touching him. In fact, when he appeared to them, they could talk to him and do all of that. Let's not put our African traditional beliefs about ghosts and those things, let's not translate that here. The point I'm making is that what the people were expecting, and in fact, in Jewish culture, they knew about the resurrection. And the teachings of the resurrection had not been, it's not the resurrection and the spiritual resurrection that they were looking out for. They knew about the bodily resurrection. And that is what Jesus demonstrated. For the mere fact that he was able to, the people could touch him, feel him alone, tells you that this is not a spirit. However, it was a glorified body.
Okay. So, it was a glorified body, like you put it. But then others also think that these are disciples that had walked with Jesus for a while. These people were traumatized by the experiences Jesus had.
Yeah.
He had told them he was going to resurrect. And they were also living in fear because their master is dead. They are afraid, they are confused as to what even happens to them next. And these are all pure recipes for hallucination. Because psychologically, the ground is fertile for any form of hallucination. So it could happen that these people were actually hallucinating about the whole thing, seeing something that wasn't as real as their minds could put it to them. And it was just a hallucination. It was just a figment of their imagination that they were seeing and thinking that Jesus has resurrected. With all this background, what response do you have to say to that? Is it refutable that they weren't really hallucinating?
Okay. So again, the hallucination theory is also something that nowadays nobody really takes seriously, because we are looking at, we now have more information about hallucinations and how hallucinations happen. So maybe I may just define a few things. So psychology, and we term all of those things as psychological theories. So there's illusion, there's delusion, and then there could be hallucination. In illusion, it's just like, when you are driving, you see, so people also claim that what they thought they were seeing was not Jesus. Sometimes when you are driving like a mirage, you see that there's some pool of water on the road. By the time you get there, you notice that there's nothing like that. That is an illusion. Once I get to know that this is not a pool of water, I don't still claim that there was a pool of water there. I get to understand that it's just an illusion. So that's an example of an illusion. A delusion is for you to still insist on something after it has been proven. There's concrete evidence to suggest that what you believe is not true. So a delusion is a false belief. After you have seen the critical, like somebody loses their husband, and the person thinks that, despite everything, says, no, I don't believe that my husband is dead. After they've even produced a death certificate, still claims that my husband is not dead. That is an example of a delusion. A hallucination is more of a false perception, that you think that what you are seeing is real, when in effect it's not real. It's just your mind that is playing, games on you. The fact that hallucinations don't happen in mass, it doesn't happen to groups where you have So it's possible that, okay, different people would hallucinate, but they will not see the same thing. That is a fact that is established. So it cannot be that 500 people are in a room or 12 people are in a room. Then they all claim to have seen one person, and the person spoke to all of them and they all heard. That cannot be hallucination, because hallucinations are individual and they cannot be, they cannot happen to a group of people that they are all seeing the same kind of thing. It doesn't happen. Psychologically, when you speak to any psychologist, they can tell you that this doesn't happen. Hallucinations are individual. They happen to individuals. Again, for the hallucination theory again, are we also saying that Paul also hallucinated and then he saw Christ and that caused his conversion? Is it that hallucination also happened to James and that also explained his conversion? How does the hallucination theory also explain the empty tomb again? If they're hallucinating, the empty tomb, the tomb is just produce the body. I don't know if you get the drift. So it cannot be hallucination in that the fact that he appeared to not just one person, but appeared to multiple people, and in some instances appeared to groups of people. It is not possible for that to be a hallucination, because we are saying that in hallucinations you would see different, and the people even see different things and see different experiences. But for them to say, okay, let's assume that it was a hallucination. Then Thomas came, and whilst I don't know how to explain this, but it's just like you are having a dream, and then in the middle of the dream you wake up, and then you call your wife that I'm seeing this nice thing, join me in my dream so that we all see it together. And that is possible. It's not possible that you are seeing something in your dream and you are experiencing that alone. Have you ever had anybody who has had a dream and then been able to wake another person, wake up, just what you saw was very nice, so you wake up briefly, call somebody to join you to see what you are seeing in the dream? It's not possible. So that is the what the proponents of the hallucination theory are calling us to, are inviting us to believe. One psychologist said that for that thing to happen, it takes greater faith for us to believe that hallucination happened when Thomas was feeling and the disciples were witnessing it. It takes greater faith to believe that than to believe the resurrection itself. You will need more faith to believe the hallucination theory than to believe even the resurrection that we are describing, because that doesn't happen anywhere. And so the hallucination theory, I don't think, should be something that should bother believers, because scientifically it has been proven that hallucinations don't happen to masses where they are all seeing the same thing, so that Jesus appeared to them and at the same time all of them were hallucinating and saw the body. But beyond that, if the disciples, let's assume the disciples were hallucinating, what about Paul and what about James? Were they also hallucinating? And in Paul's instance, it's not possible for him to hallucinate about the risen Christ, because Paul wasn't expecting any risen Christ, because this is somebody who was persecuting the believers and actually believing that what they were saying was a lie. And so with the premise, okay, the disciples were expecting him, let's assume that is true. What about Paul? Was he also expecting to see the risen Christ, and therefore he also hallucinated? It falls flat as somebody, the argument has fallen flat. Yes.
Okay. So we also take this last theory. So there are others who think that this story just ran parallel to other pagan gods.
Yeah.
Even right from his virgin birth through to the miracles he did, to his death, persecution, and his resurrection. So they think it is a pattern that even the pagan gods, their lives follow. So it's just a parallel thing that every religious sect would want their forerunners life to be modeled after. So it is nothing new. I mean, all the other pagan gods are going through that experience. So what is your response to that as well?
So yes, there are stories that there were pagan gods, Osiris, and all those people who are claimed to have resurrected. In fact, when you read the stories are not even clear in the first place. In one instance, there's an example where it's claimed that one of the gods, the body was chopped into four. Then suddenly one other god joined the body together, and that's it. And then the god left, disappeared. The stories are not clear, they are not historical. There's no evidence to prove it. They were, things that were said to glorify certain heroes or gods, create heroes out of these people. The fact is that these stories don't have any basis. There is no evidence to it. There is no nobody even died for it in the first place. The point I'm making is that in the instance of Jesus, we are talking about a historical event, not a myth. As these rising gods, exemplify. Again, there are instances also where we don't even have any source close to those rising gods theory. The fact that we have early sources in the instance of Christ. Within a year, we could have people who were testifying for this and were willing to die. So the rising gods theory is really one that fits perfectly for for the legend theory. In that there's a lot of time, sometimes even about 400 years before those stories were developed. That is not the case for Christ. Again, if it's it just follows that parallels. Okay, that's fine, granted. Even if that's the case, how does that explain the empty tomb? How does that again explain the conversion of Paul? How does that again explain the conversion of James? How does that again explain the fact that the disciples were willing to die for what they sincerely believed they had seen? And so for all the 500 people, they were just looking at glorifying somebody and were willing to die for just that and to accept that lie. That doesn't make any sense. If we really want to, it would have been good, just that we don't have time. We would have taken each and every one of those stories and go into it and look into it, and you realize that in all of those stories, it's a clear example of a myth. It's a clear example of a legend that's developed over the years, and there is no historical evidence to support any of those claims.
All right. Thank you very much, Kafui. I think we've been able to address some of the theories postulated against the resurrection. I know there is more out there, and hopefully in our subsequent episodes, you make the time to address the other ones and also even look into detail some of the ones that we have brushed over in this episode's discussion. So even before we wrap up, do you have any final words to say about all these skeptics theories that are being leveled against the resurrection of Christ?
Okay, so in concluding, I'll just say that for me personally, the more I look into the evidence for the resurrection, the more I study, the more I look at even extra biblical accounts and other things, the more I become convinced, the more it is clear that Jesus actually died and resurrected, and it is the only thing that's able to explain the established facts. Last time we were talking about what historians use to establish that something is historical. And when you run the resurrection story by all of this, it passes all of them. It passes all of the tests. You know, the theory of the principle of embarrassment, the fact that it was women that discovered, the fact that the disciples admit their own faults speaks to it. You know, the accounts or the hostile witnesses, they all speak to that fact. And so the resurrection is a fact. It's something that happened. And if indeed it happened, then all the claims of Jesus Christ is true. And it means that Christianity is actually the only way. The only way for mankind to know God. Because Jesus embodies, God. He embodies all the things that we have been talking about. The other day I was talking about the 4 questions that we keep asking ourselves. Where do we come from? When you look at the life of Jesus, he claims that he came from God. That means that, and then he speaks and answers to mankind in general, to the fact that it was God that created mankind. And so the question of origin is established. Why are we here? Jesus came for a specific purpose. What it means to all of us is that we are on this earth for a reason, for a purpose. Unlike what some other worldviews believe, like our naturalist or atheist brothers believe, that there is no purpose and we are just in. It's not like that, because Jesus exemplifies clearly that man came on this earth for a purpose and for a reason. And so there is a meaning to life. The fact that the question of morality, how does the life of Jesus speak to? Because Jesus tells us and is able to help us to identify what is right and what is wrong. And beyond all of that, when we die, what happens? Jesus exemplifies that also with his resurrection. That beyond this physical world, there is a spiritual world. Beyond this physical world, there is life after death. There is judgment ahead of us. And dying doesn't end everything. It also speaks to the problem of suffering. That you may have lost somebody, but that is not the end of it. At the end of the age, when the time is due, you shall see that person again. And all the injustice that we see in the world, people are not going to go scot-free. And it all comes down to the resurrection of Christ. And so this is a very important thing. And I'll just invite every one of us to take it more seriously, look into it, search for the theories, and read about it yourself. There are several books that have been written, a case for the resurrection, Lee Strobel's book, there's Gary Habermas and Licona. You can read all of these books, and there are books written by William Lane Craig, looking at all of these, exploring all the possible evidence that speak to the resurrection. Tons of research that have been done to establish this fact. And so the resurrection is real. And if it is real, it has consequences. And buttresses the fact that Christianity is true. So that would be my last comment to this. And just to challenge anyone who does not think that this resurrection is true, to really reach out, and we'll go through the evidence one after the other, as opposed to any of those alternate theories, and see which one stands. And we'll also go back to prove other historical events that we believe happened, and we'll compare and see whether those ones have enough evidence as compared to the resurrection. So that would be my last words. Thank you.
All right, so thank you very much, Kafui, and thank you all, our viewers. It has been a wonderful and an eye-opening session. I believe that we have gotten enough information that helps us to rebut all these skeptics' opinion against the resurrection of Christ. And we look forward to more exciting episodes in the ensuing weeks. Enjoy the rest of your day and have a wonderful day. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Shadow beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Hi, I'm Joshua Ponsafo of the New African Concept. I believe strongly that you've been blessed so far with the various episodes of the Voice of Reformation. And I'm very much excited to inform you that with the next 3 months ahead, February, March, and then April, there is a special package in the area of apologetics. I know you have several questions on your mind, and so do I. For the month of February, we'll be considering the subject area of the Bible. So questions like, is the Bible truly the Word of God, or it is just a figment of human beings? And that, how did we even arrive at getting our Bible today? There are various versions of the Bible, and how did we even get that? And are they the same? Are they similar? Or they are different? In the month of March, we'll also be looking at the subject of black skepticism. I believe you've heard and seen that there is a new wave that is called the woke or black consciousness, the new form of Pan-Africanism, where they are hitting strongly that for Africa to advance, we must do away with everything called religion, particularly the Christian faith. Was Christianity carved by the white man in order to rule or manipulate the black man? Is it true that we have the Bible and in several churches doing the biddings of the white man? Is it even true that Christianity impedes growth or otherwise? Join me this and every Friday from 7 to 8 p.m. on the Voice of Reformation as we look at these subjects. We have able facilitators, the likes of Elder Emmanuel Emisa, Pastor Jacob Honey, Pastor Patrick, Mark Edubuating, and then Kafui Te. The good thing is also that the last Friday of every month, you get an opportunity to join in by bringing on board your questions so that we ask them for serious interactions. I believe that with all these interactions, the ultimate goal is that Ghana and by extension Africa will be liberated and saved. See ya.